There's something profoundly troubling about realizing you've been given the wrong narrative your whole life. Not just any narrative, but the one about your future, your safety, your independence, your retirement. Because retirement isn't only about finances. It's about dignity. It's about control. It's about whether you wake up one day feeling free or limited by choices you made many years earlier. And yet, despite how significant this is, millions of people are building their retirement plans on advice that sounds smart, feels reassuring, but quietly puts them on track to struggle. I see it constantly. People who did everything correctly. They saved, they invested, they followed the guidance of well-known financial voices, and still something doesn't fit. Something feels wrong, and often by the time they notice it, it's too late to fix easily. So today, I want to open the curtain, not to criticize for the sake of it, not to tear anyone apart, but to tell you the truth clearly, honestly, and without softening it. Because when it comes to your retirement, clarity is compassion. The problem with one-size-fits-all advice. Let's begin with something important. Financial personalities like Dave Ramsey and Suze Orman have helped millions of people. That matters. They've helped people get out of debt. They've helped people take charge of their financial lives. They've made money conversations feel less overwhelming. That's genuine impact. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Getting out of debt is not the same as building a retirement strategy. Not even remotely. One is about behavior, discipline, mindset, habits. The other is about risk, timing, market cycles, tax efficiency, longevity, and uncertainty. It's not simple. It's not linear. And it definitely isn't something you can reduce to a catchy rule or a headline. And yet, that's exactly what happens because simple advice spreads faster. It feels easier. It gives people confidence even when that confidence is false. Claim number one, you can safely withdraw 8% in retirement. Let's talk about one of the most risky ideas floating around in retirement planning. The belief that you can withdraw 8% of your portfolio every year and be completely fine. At first glance, it sounds incredible. You work hard, build your savings, and then just like that, you can take a generous income for decades without concern. It's appealing, it's empowering, and it's deeply flawed. Where this idea comes from? To understand the problem, we need to go back to a study from 1994 by financial planner William Bengen. He analyzed decades of market data and came to a simple conclusion. If retirees withdrew 4% of their portfolio annually, adjusted for inflation, their money would likely last at least 30 years. That became known as the 4% rule. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't designed for every situation, but it was grounded in historical data and careful assumptions. Then somewhere along the way, that cautious conservative guideline got stretched, twisted, repackaged, and suddenly we weren't talking about 4%. We were talking about 8%. Why the 8% rule feels so convincing? Because it taps into something very human. We want to believe that markets will always perform well. Growth will outpace withdrawals. The future will look like the strongest years of the past. And when someone tells you that you can safely double your income in retirement, of course it sounds right. Of course it feels good. But feelings don't fund retirements. Math does. The reality most people don't see. Let's make this real. Imagine you retire with $2 million. Under the 4% rule, you withdraw $80,000 in your first year. Under the 8% rule, that jumps to $160,000. Double the income, same savings. It sounds like a dream. But here's what's missing from that picture. Markets don't give you steady returns. Losses happen, sometimes early, sometimes severe. Inflation eats away at purchasing power. Fees and taxes quietly reduce your gains. And most importantly, the timing of returns matters more than the average return. The silent danger, sequence of returns, risk. This is the part almost nobody talks about, but it changes everything. If the market drops early in your retirement, you're not just losing money, you're withdrawing from a shrinking portfolio, which means you sell more shares, you lock in losses, you leave less money to recover, and suddenly a temporary downturn becomes a lasting problem. We saw this during the Great Recession. Portfolios were cut nearly in half. People who thought they were ready to retire weren't anymore. Some had to return to work. Others adjusted their lifestyle dramatically, and many never fully recovered. Why 8% breaks under pressure? Let's say you retire right before a downturn. Your portfolio drops 25%, 30%, even 50%. But your withdrawals, they don't stop. They increase with inflation. So now you're pulling more money from a smaller pool. And that's the moment things start to unravel. Not immediately, not obviously, but quietly, consistently, until one day the math no longer works. That's the danger. Not that it fails all the time, but that when it fails hard. What the data actually shows. When researchers studied higher withdrawal rates, the results were clear. At 8%, the probability of running out of money increases dramatically. In fact, in many scenarios, portfolios don't even last 20 to 30 years. And let's be honest, retirement today isn't getting shorter. People are living longer. Healthcare costs are rising. Uncertainty is increasing. This is not the time to rely on optimistic assumptions. The bigger issue no one talks about. Even the original 4% rule has limitations, because real life isn't predictable. You don't spend the same amount every year. You have phases. Early retirement, when you travel, explore, live fully. Mid-retirement, when things stabilize. Later years, when spending often declines. Your life changes. Your needs change. Your spending changes. But rigid rules, they don't. Retirement planning isn't about chasing the highest withdrawal rate. It's about creating resilience. It's about building a system that can handle market volatility, unexpected expenses, longer lifespans, emotional decision-making. Because at the end of the day, the goal isn't just to retire. The goal is to stay retired comfortably, confidently, and on your terms. This is where most people get it wrong. They optimize for income instead of optimizing for stability. Claim number 2, you need 5 to 10 million to retire comfortably. There's a different kind of fear that shows up in retirement conversations. It's quieter than market crashes, more subtle than bad investment advice, but in many ways, it's even more dangerous. It's the belief that no matter what you've saved, it's not enough. And that belief has been amplified by voices like Suze Orman, who at one point suggested that retiring comfortably could require $5 million, even $10 million. Now pause for a second. Think about what that does to the average person. Because most people aren't sitting on $5 million. Most people aren't even close. So what happens? They feel behind. They feel inadequate. They feel like retirement is something reserved for other people, and quietly they give up on the idea of financial freedom altogether. This is where the damage happens. Not in the math, in the mindset. Because when people believe the finish line is impossibly far away, they stop running the race. Or worse, they keep running long after they've already won. They delay retirement. They postpone joy. They trade years of their life for a number that was never actually required. And that's the tragedy. Let's ground this in reality, because here's the truth. There is no universal number for retirement. Not 1 million, not 2 million, and certainly not 10 million. What you need depends on how you live, where you live, what you spend, how your money is structured, and how flexible your plan is. Retirement isn't a number, it's a strategy. Meet Dan and Kathy, a realistic scenario. Let's make this real. Imagine a couple, Dan and Kathy. They're both 58. They've worked hard, they've been responsible, and now they're asking the question that matters. Can we retire next month? Here's what they have. Roughly 1.8 million in investable assets, a home worth about $500,000, a remaining mortgage of $200,000. Their goal to spend about $100,000 per year in retirement. Not extravagant, not minimal, just comfortable. By Suze Orman's standard, they're nowhere near ready. They don't have $5 million, they don't have $10 million. So, by that logic, they should keep working, keep waiting, keep postponing. But here's what the data actually says. When we analyze their situation properly, accounting for investment allocation, inflation, taxes, Social Security timing, longevity, market volatility, something surprising happens. Their plan works not perfectly, not blindly, but realistically. Under normal market conditions, they have about a 98% probability of success. That means in 980 out of 1,000 possible market scenarios, they don't run out of money. They retire, they live, they sustain their lifestyle. So, what's the catch? Because there's always a catch. The real question isn't, will everything go perfectly? The real question is, what happens when things don't? Stress changes everything. Let's introduce a stress scenario, a market crash early in retirement, the kind that feels distant until it isn't. Suddenly, their portfolio drops significantly, hundreds of thousands lost on paper, and their probability of success falls from 98% to around 49%. That's the same concept we talked about earlier. Sequence of returns, risk timing, matters a lot. But here's the key insight. This is where most people panic, where they assume, see, we need more money. But that's not actually the solution, because more money doesn't eliminate risk. It just delays when you feel it. The real fix isn't more money. It's better strategy. Instead of chasing a bigger number, Dan and Kathy make smarter adjustments. They restructure their portfolio. They bucket their money short-term, mid-term, long-term. They protect early retirement income from market volatility. And just like that, their probability of success jumps back up into a safe, confident range. Not because they saved more, but because they planned better. Let that sink in. They didn't need $5 million. They didn't need to work another decade. They didn't need to sacrifice years of their life. They just needed a thoughtful plan, a realistic understanding of risk, and the willingness to adjust another scenario. Less money still works. Now, let's take it even further. Meet another couple, Jim and Jennifer. Mid-60s, about $600,000 in savings, a paid-off home. By traditional standards, they're behind. Way behind. But here's what happens when you actually plan with the right adjustments, optimized investments, controlled spending, smart Social Security decisions. They achieve close to a 90% probability of success. Again, not perfect, but strong, stable, realistic. So, what does this tell us? It tells us something powerful, something most people never hear. Retirement success is not about hitting a magic number. It's about aligning your money with your life. Why the $5 million rule is so harmful? Because it shifts your focus away from what actually matters. Instead of asking, how do I build a resilient plan? You start asking, how do I chase a bigger number? And those are very different questions. One leads to freedom. The other leads to overwork, oversaving, and underliving. Because you're constantly moving the goalpost, always thinking just a little more, then I'll be safe. But safety doesn't come from excess. It comes from clarity, from understanding what you need, what you can control, and what risks you're actually facing. The emotional cost no one talks about. Let's be honest for a moment. Money advice isn't just about spreadsheets. It's about how people feel. And when someone tells you that you need up to $10 million to retire, what they're really telling you is you're not ready. You're behind. You should be worried, even if that's not true, and that fear has consequences. People delay retirement unnecessarily, stay in jobs they no longer love, miss time with family, ignore their health, all in pursuit of a number that may never have been required in the first place. The truth most people need to hear. You don't need perfection. You don't need certainty. You don't need an unrealistic number that only a small percentage of people will ever reach. What you need is a plan that adapts, a strategy that protects, and the confidence to act.